Okay, let me just say this now. I'm not here to be poetic about the golden days of Final Fantasy. This ain't that video. What I'm here to talk about is something that's kind of been nagging me for a while. The idea of risk. Like, real risk. Not fan service disguised as progress. At some point, between airships and awkward minigames, this franchise stopped making me feel anything at all. And before anyone jumps in with, well, maybe you just outgrew it, or no, I didn't outgrow it. I waited, I showed up, I played all of them, and I kept waiting. What I saw instead was a series that simplified, rebranded, reinvented itself, but never really evolved. And yeah, I know that sounds dramatic, but just stick around. There was a turning point. And for me, it was right after X2. That's when the walls started shifting. Not like in a bad game kind of way, more like a we're trying to look brand new without actually doing anything risky kind of way. Every entry after that felt like it wanted to be something different, but none of it hit in the way it should have, and I'm not here to say which one is better than the other. It's not that video either. I'm here to tell you why they didn't resonate with me, and maybe in doing that you'll start thinking about what you really want to see from the series too. That's the point of all of this. I'm not here to change your mind. I want to ask this question out loud. What do we lose when we stop letting developers take real risks? Okay, let me just fire this warning shot off now before we dive any further in. Final Fantasy X2 was not a bad game. Let's just get that out of the way. But it was the first time I looked at Final Fantasy and thought, okay, is this what we're doing now? I remember it was a buddy of mine, he actually got the game first, and I got to see it, sitting over his shoulders, and I just remember all of it being so crazy. Colors, vibrance, pop songs, like, it went nuts. It went nuts. So much so that I was intrigued just by the visuals of it all and had to get my own copy within a matter of a few months because I wanted to play it myself. And I remember playing it and following the 100% completion guide because you were going to get a special ending if you had completed everything, and it was going to be the greatest. And for me, it was. I got the secret special ending for talking to every NPC in the game and playing every minigame, and it was 3 a.m. I had stayed the night over a friend's house, and I woke him up just so he could bear witness to the achievement that I had, because achievements didn't exist back then, so you kind of just needed a witness or else you were saying you beat a game. In any case, besides the fact that I loved the game, it still didn't take away from the fact that everything about it felt off. Not in a broken way. It was strange. It was the music, the outfits, the energy. It was like the series took a shot of espresso and ran off in the other direction. Still, I kept playing. Ultimately, I thought, okay, maybe they're really going for something wild this time. And they were. Don't get me wrong, kind of. The dress sphere system was creative, combat was fast, you could switch classes mid-fight, which was badass. But under all the flash, I kept asking myself, is this what Risk looks like now? A costume swap. The tone was so bubbly it almost felt like they were afraid of being heavy again, as if the ending of X had to be surgically removed to make room for a pop concert. I'm not saying it should have been dark and miserable, or like a Zack Snyder film, but it did feel like a retreat. Like something high up panicked and said, let's make this funnier, lighter, safer. And I think that's when the alarm bells went off for Final Fantasy, because up until then, each game felt like it had something to say. Even the weirder ones had a backbone. But X2, it felt like a remix, a colorful, sometimes fun, sometimes awkward remix. It wasn't pushing forward, it was kind of just pivoting sideways. And I knew then, whatever came next, it kind of wasn't going to be about storytelling risk, it was going to be about reinvention. I think I started watching these games differently, a lot of them, not for what they are, but what they weren't willing to be anymore. Final Fantasy XI was the first time I felt like Square wasn't even leading anymore. They were chasing. I had found out that Final Fantasy had gotten its own MMO, and this was during the time of World of Warcraft and every other cheap, Korean knockoff MMOs that were coming out that were free. Square jumped into the fray as well, and it just, looking at it, it was a lot. There were, I don't even know how to explain it. I remember watching my friend dive into it, and for a second I wanted in. It was that itch, that, what, FOMO? Yeah. That need to be a part of everything that everyone was talking about. It was an MMO, a Final Fantasy MMO, and everyone could be in the same active universe. But I couldn't. The setup was too much. The PS2 hard drive situation was a nightmare. I don't even want to get into that. Monthly fees, time. It wasn't happening. And the whole time I'm just sitting here thinking, since when did the king of single-player RPGs decide they needed to follow the crowd? This was post-EverQuest. It was right around the time of World of Warcraft. And World of Warcraft had taken the world by storm. Everybody turned to look. Everybody played it. Celebrities, whatever. Everyone was looking for their own online kingdom, and Square looked over the fence and said, yeah, I'll have one too. But here's the thing. MMOs are never small swings. They're arrogant swings. And I don't take that term lightly. They rely on the belief that your name alone is enough to keep people paying. And back then, Final Fantasy's name was powerful. But even as a kid, I could feel it. This wasn't a creative leap. It was an attempt to glue themselves to a trend. I played for all but an hour, and that was it. I got in, walked around, and I didn't feel a thing. Not because it was a bad game or anything like that, but and certainly not because it was broken. I think it was because I didn't want this from them. I don't think anybody really did. This wasn't world building anymore. This is world management. And I didn't sign up to be a server admin on Vanadale. Like, that wasn't me. It was branded as bold, but to me it was the safest risk they could have taken. MMOs print money if they stick, and that's the logic. But in that logic, you lose the spark and the soul, the part that made Final Fantasy feel personal. 11 wasn't the end of anything, but it was the first time I realized they'd start making decisions without me in mind. So 12 came out right after 11, and yeah, I bought it day one. It was single player. That was enough for me. I'm not gonna lie. You know, being younger and being the consumer that I was, as soon as they told me they went back to formula with, single player, I was in. Yeah, I bought the Steelbook. Every part of it was amazing. Opening the Steelbook and finding an instruction manual and I don't know, a poster or something like that. That was good enough for me. But even from the opening hours, I could feel it. This wasn't a return to form at all. This was a salvage operation. They essentially gutted the online elements of 11 and duct taped what was left to it to a single-player frame. And it showed. A real-time system, the Gambit system. People talk about how deep it was, and yeah, you could break it wide open with the right setups, but it never felt like my game. It felt like I was playing a game that wanted to feel like an MMO without giving me what MMOs actually offer. Connection, unpredictability, spontaneity. It was a half dish. Half of what I didn't like about 11 served cold. But here's the wild part, though. The writing, the world, it was sharp. The characters were layered, the dialogue was solid, Ash had weight, Balthier had a highlight, and even the political tension in Ivalice had a mature tone that I was not expecting. But then there was Vaughn. Dropped in like a mannequin to give the marketing team something pretty to push. He wasn't bad, he was just... he was nothing. And you can feel it as well. This game had been wrestled into place. Halfway through, I stopped thinking about risk. I started thinking about compromise. You do that after a while when you get a game you like or a franchise you like. After so long, you begin to compromise with your own wants and desires in the game. And this is what keeps you from kind of not being disappointed forever. But on the same token, that compromise will cause a game to go down a spiral that you're essentially approving. And this had been the third iteration, after, the second iteration after X2 that just seemingly didn't get it anymore. Or they were going somewhere else that I just could not follow. This was a game that wanted to be bold. It had too many choices in the room, too many ideas stapled together, too many bets were hedged. It wasn't until years later that I found out the director left mid-development, and that kind of explained everything. But 12 had all the pieces of something incredible, but the risk is the part that got diluted. It tried to play politics in the story and in the dev room, and the results were a game I respected, but I never loved. Because when you cut risk with fear, you don't get innovation, you get a product. But 13 was the one that absolutely broke me. I remember thinking, okay, they're going big. They're ditching the safe stuff, the new world, new combat, new mythos. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the risk I was waiting for. I waited in games at a GameStop at midnight for this game. I signed up for the pre-order. I bought into all of it. The advertisements, the actual TV commercials, because anytime Square Enix pushes a TV commercial on regular TV back then, when that still was a thing, you knew it was going to be major. Every part of it. And then 5 hours in, 10 hours in, I started to realize I was sprinting down a hallway. Not metaphorically, literally. Every environment was a tube, a beautiful, high-res, meticulously lit tube. It felt like I was being trapped inside of a wallpaper slideshow. And yeah, they said the story was complex. They said the lore was deep. But they buried it in a made-up lexicon and forced you to pause the game to read whatever just happened. The game didn't trust you to feel anything unless you took homework breaks. In the cast, I don't think any of these characters are bad, but I didn't connect with any of them, not once. Not to Lightning, to Snow, not even to Zaz. And he had a chocobo living in his afro. That should have been a slam dunk. It all felt like watching a rehearsal, like they built the world before they built the meaning. I finished it, I pushed through, don't get me wrong, and by the time it opened up, by the time I finally got freedom, I was so numb that I didn't even care anymore. Like, I just didn't. X2 warned me, but 13 proved it. They weren't trying to evolve, they were trying to control the pacing, the emotion, the expectations, me. I wasn't playing anymore, I was being shown things. And that's when I realized something that still sticks with me today. If you build your world like a tunnel, you can't be surprised when people walk away looking for a door. I think by the time 15 rolled around, I had already compromised. I had accepted the fact that we live in an action-paced world. Everything is streamlined and everything, I don't know. When I saw Noctis zipping around like a teleporting Goku, I didn't even blink. It didn't even register to me as a problem or something that's dumb. I just immediately kind of bought into it. My wife wasn't exactly an avid player of all the Final Fantasies, but when she saw it, she said, that looks pretty, that looks good, looks like it might be fun. So we got it. I played the game, and I thought, okay, cool, let's do it, let's see what it looks like. I wasn't mad, I wasn't hopeful, I was just, to be fairly honest, I was adjusted. And then I beat it in a month. And all my favorite Final Fantasy games, whenever I played them in the past, they took months. So I noticed this as kind of alarming. I would take hundreds of hours, side quests that spiraled into their own legends, and worlds that lived in your head even when the console was off. All this stuff happened because I had a fondness and attachment to the plot line and the story and the world and the universe. That's the only reason why it went on as long as it did. I could have just blasted through the game, but I didn't, and the reason why is because I simply loved the game that much. I loved the storyline that much. I was engrossed in it. But with 15, 1 month and I was done. Yeah, there were hunts, there were dungeons, there was a world, but I didn't feel invited into it. It felt like I was being driven through in the back seat. And the more I played, the more I realized that this wasn't new or daring. It was an action game, with some Final Fantasy paint slapped on top of it. Magic still there, summons technically present, terminology used freely, but the soul of the franchise itself, the part that made me think, that made me wait, that made me care, it was gone. And I know this sounds like bitterness. It's not. This is what happens when you simplify, when you chase mass appeal instead of chasing meaning. 15 played like it wanted to be everyone's first Final Fantasy. My wife loved it, but that means it wasn't mine anymore. Not really. I didn't play Final Fantasy 16. Not out of spite, not out of protest. Life just kind of moved on. Started family, all that good stuff. But when I saw the trailer, I knew. I didn't even blink. It felt like someone had described Final Fantasy to a CGI studio, and that was what they produced. All the pieces were there: crystals, nations, magic, war. It was loud, cinematic, gorgeous. But I didn't feel a damn thing. It wasn't the action that threw me. I had already made peace with that back in 15's day. It was the tone, the presentation, the performative seriousness of it all. It looked like a game trying to convince the world it had grown up. But you don't prove maturity by being louder, you prove it by being honest. And this did not feel honest. This felt manufactured as shit. The kind of game built by a committee, the kind of world designed for trailers, not for players. I didn't need to play it to know it wasn't for me. Not anymore. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the series wasn't supposed to come with me forever. But I can't help but ask, when did we stop trying to build meaning and start building marketing instead? Because if 16 was supposed to be the risk, then maybe the biggest risk was assuming people like me would still be watching. Now, let me be clear about something. I've loved something in every single one of these games, hands down. Whether it was a moment, a line, a system, a theme, none of this comes from hate. It comes from knowing what the series used to make me feel, and realizing that I haven't felt that in a long time, with any franchise, to be fairly honest. This isn't nostalgia for what I remember, though, but it's not, I wish a menu looked the same, or I wish people would go back to this, way of, it's nothing like that. It's, what it is? It's nostalgia for how I felt. There was a time where I was engrossed, consumed, obsessed, watching a studio try something we'd never seen, and then letting the writing do all the heavy lifting. And I think that's what's missing. I think that's what hurts about this. Because Square spent the better part of the last 22 years making sure they could not go wrong. They borrowed every great idea from the industry, they rebranded it under a familiar banner. And yeah, some of those ideas worked, some of those games thrilled people. But for me, it was never about the trend, it was about trust. Trusting that the studio, the same one that gave me opera houses, time-traveling villains, falling moons, and quiet heartbreak, would keep swinging for the fences. And instead they started aiming for safe landings, for trailers, for algorithms. So no, this is not a call to go back. It's a call to go forward. To make something risky again, to let stories matter again, to stop making games for everyone and start making them for someone. I don't need another Final Fantasy that reminds me of the past. I just want one that makes me feel something again. Anything. I realize I usually ride on the side of neutrality for a lot of my videos, but this one's kind of personal for me, and you guys voted, and absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, thought this would be the next best video. So there you are. But yeah. Now I'm handing it off to you, though. I don't want to debate rankings. I don't want to argue which one aged better. That doesn't matter to me. But I do want you to ask yourself, when was the last time a Final Fantasy game truly surprised you? And I don't mean a twist or a summon, but the overall intention. You know what I mean? Like, when's the last time you were just blown away by what you had heard? For some, it's Final Fantasy VII, it goes that far back and then it's all downhill from there. I think X2 was a prime example of a damn good story, and then the new shit came in and I hoped it would be awesome, and then I realized just how safe we were going. What do you miss about Final Fantasy, or what do you miss about storylines? Not about the systems, not about the music, but the feeling it gave you. What do you miss in that regard? Why don't we talk about that for once instead of comparing whose Final Fantasy is better than the other? I already get enough of that in the Silent Hill videos. Anyway, shout out to everybody on Patreon. Much love to you guys. You guys have been absolutely just storming through my videos. Some people complain that I didn't speak on my behalf enough and I didn't sound very human. So there you go. This is me human. And if anyone else accuses me of being an AI, I will, overtake the planet and you'll be the first person I go after. I'm just kidding. Or am I? Anyway, much love, guys. I'm getting the hell out of here.